Hello, Bay Ridge. Welcome to another edition of After Hours. On Sunday, we were looking at why Jesus had to be truly and fully God to be our Redeemer. This is what's kind of known as Christology, going through the nature of Jesus and his person. Who is he and what is he like and what has he done for us? And so I want to take a couple of minutes to talk a little bit about the deity of Christ and the Da Vinci Code. Looking at those two things, the Da Vinci Code was a really popular book a few years ago. It actually delved into this, and it tried to say that the problem came along when the church changed its mind and started treating Jesus as if he were God. And I mentioned on Sunday that actually the first time this issue really came up was with a man named Arius, who was a leader in the church in Alexandria. And it did lead, in fact, to the Council of Nicea. The Da Vinci Code doesn't really mention Arius, but it does mention the Council of Nicea, but it completely mangles up the history. And so I wanted to take just a minute to kind of go through and talk about it. Now, as I'd mentioned, it just so happens the reason this is the first full council of the church is because the church had been under persecution all the way into the early 300s. In fact, under Diocletian, around the year 300, the church endured one of the worst persecutions ever, if not the worst persecution. But coming out of that, the empire had been split kind of into four administrative districts, and one of the leaders was Constantine. But there was a fight that started kind of in the emperors in the west, and at Milvian Bridge in 312, 27th of October in 312, Constantine claimed he saw a vision of the sun, and which he interpreted as being the sun god, but related to Jesus. And he was told, by this sign you will conquer. There was a cross involved. And so Constantine began a journey towards the Christian faith. In AD 313, he issued the Edict of Toleration that they were no longer going to persecute Christians. By 324, he had become the emperor over the entire empire. The eastern and western halves of the empire kind of got in a fight, and Constantine took over the entire empire in 324. And so the issue that had been going on in recent years in Alexandria was brought to the forefront, and there in fact was a general council of the church was called for a whole bunch of reasons, one of which was to deal with the question of Arianism. So it was not the only thing, but it met at a place called Nicea in 325 AD. And the reason for it then was not that Constantine was forcing the church to believe in the deity of Christ or anything like that. It simply couldn't have happened prior to then. Until Constantine had made Christianity legal and the entire empire was united in 324 AD, there could not have been a full council of the church that was just meeting out and open and doing all this. And so it was the first opportunity, really. And it was also the first time that it was really needed, because Arius was changing what the church had taught and believed. The church had received the New Testament, but Arius was trying to shift and change what that was. And this is an important thing for us to understand. Sometimes heretics, people who want to change the faith, will say, well, the church didn't define this until Nicea, or the church didn't say this until X. But it's because the error had not cropped up. Very often the church doesn't take the time to write down a creed or a statement of faith until there are errors that crop up. And that's exactly what happened at Nicea. The church had always believed in the deity of Christ, but suddenly there were a group of people that were saying, well, maybe Jesus wasn't God. Maybe he's just a human being. And so, as I mentioned on Sunday morning, Arius started saying that Jesus was the first created being. The phrase became, there was a time when he was not. The Da Vinci Code erroneously says Christians had always believed there was a time that he was not. That Constantine forced the bishops to change their mind, that Christians had never actually believed that Jesus was divine. But it's all over the New Testament that Jesus is in fact divine. The church had always believed that. And the council at Nicea simply affirmed the teaching of the New Testament, that Jesus was divine, he was not created. In their words, he was begotten, not made. He is not a created being, but is in fact the creator of everything. The council at Nicea affirmed that Christ was eternal. There never was a time when he was not. And furthermore, they said, look, Jesus is equal with the Father in being. The Greek word the word we derive from that is ontologically. That comes from the Greek word ontos. It means in his being he is equal, but he was subordinate to the Father in his role. Theologians sometimes refer to this as economically, in the administration, in the outworking of the work of God. Jesus is truly and fully equal with the Father, so is the Holy Spirit. But the Son and the Spirit take subordinate roles. Arius made a mistake in taking the subordination in their work to being that they weren't truly and fully God. But the church at Nicea said, no, that is not true. And this has been the position of all Orthodox Christians from that time. During communion on Sunday, I actually used some phrases out of the Nicene Creed as we were praying, speaking of Jesus as God of God, light of light, very God of very God, begotten, not made, and also the Holy Spirit is the Lord and giver of life, proceeding from the Father and the Son. These are things that came from Nicea and that the church has been confessing ever since. It was reaffirmed at Constantinople and then at other places, but the church confesses so that many Christians recite this creed each and every Sunday. But the Da Vinci Code and other sources today want to say, well, that's not really true, but they're just misrepresenting history. For example, the Da Vinci Code acts as if they were voting on whether Jesus was God, and it was this very close vote. It was not. It was actually 300-2, I think, was the final vote. Not exactly a nail biter. The bishops recognized what the church had always believed, that Jesus is truly God. And so we need to be aware. There are the Da Vinci Code, but many other writings that want to distort the truth of who Jesus is and what he's done in the gospel that has been given once for all to the saints. If you'd like to dive into this a little bit more, I actually did a day-long seminar on the Da Vinci Code, but it's really looking at the deity of Christ and questions of, did the church always believe that Jesus was God? How was this handed down to us? Did Jesus really marry Mary Magdalene? And what happened at Nicea? What was Constantine's role? I delve into that a lot because it's church history, but it's also helping us to understand who Jesus is. You can look that up on our church website if you go under teachings and other resources to other resources and you go to, there's a thing called seminars. You can see I've done 3 of them. How did I get my Bible? 1 on the Da Vinci Code, and then how to study the Bible. These were long, deep dives into this. You can also look at the notes as well as being able to listen to the audio. It's worth our study. It's worth our time because the doctrine of the deity of Christ is central. It is essential. It is not some extra little thing. And so it's very important for us to understand. There have been people, Satan has always raised up people. In our text on Sunday, Paul told the Ephesian elders, savage wolves were going to come in among the flock. They had to rise up and be shepherds. He said, you men need to be shepherds of this church, because he said, even from your own number, men are going to arise and distort the truth. That happened in Ephesus. It's been happening ever since to attack the church. It happened, with Dan Brown and his misrepresentations in the Da Vinci Code. There is much pressure today to want to deny who Jesus really is. But friends, if we lose that, we have lost the gospel. There is no salvation. It's that essential. So I encourage you to dive in more. I hope this helps you. I hope you have a great week, and I look forward to us gathering this Sunday. We should be mask-free. We are looking forward to be able to gather that way and worship our great God for the redemption he has given us in Jesus Christ. God bless.